If you hear knocking after midnight, don't answer.
I bought the house for a price that didn't make sense. Too cheap, too quiet, too empty. The real estate agent never looked me in the eye when she handed me the keys. She only said one thing before leaving. If you hear knocking after midnight, don't answer. I laughed that day. I stopped laughing the first night I slept there because the house was not empty, and it never was. My name is Ethan Carter. I was 32 when I bought the house on Ravenwood Lane, a 2-story home, white paint peeling, windows so dark they felt like they were watching you. The neighborhood was silent, but not in a peaceful way. It was an unsettling silence. No dogs barking, no kids playing, not even the sound of the wind. Inside, the air was cold, even though the power was on. The house had this smell, not just dust, but something worse, like damp wood and old metal. That first night, I was unpacking by myself. At exactly 11:47 p.m., I heard the first sound. Knock, knock, knock. It wasn't coming from the door. It was coming from inside the walls. I froze. The knocking started to move slowly, like fingers dragging behind the drywall. I tried to convince myself it was just the pipes, old houses make noise. Then at exactly midnight, everything stopped. Dead silence. And that's when I heard it. A whisper from upstairs. You're home. The next morning, I checked the blueprints the agent gave me. 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, 1 attic. But when I counted doors upstairs, there were 4. The 4th door was at the end of the hallway. No handle, no lock, just scratch marks. From the inside, that night, the knocking returned louder. Bang, bang, bang. The 4th door began to shake. I pressed my ear against it, breathing, heavy, wet, excited. Then a voice that sounded like mine whispered, "Open it." Ethan. I ran downstairs and slept on the couch with all the lights on. At 3:17 a.m., the TV turned on by itself, static, and a sentence burned into the screen, "The house remembers you." The next morning, I drove straight to the town records office, the deed clutched in my hand. The clerk, a woman with tired eyes and a kind face, took the paper from me. But as she read the address, the color drained from her face. She looked up, her voice barely a whisper. "People don't stay there," she said, her hands trembling slightly. "They disappear." My heart pounded against my ribs. Disappear? What did she mean? She led me to a dusty back room filled with old ledgers. She pulled one down, its pages yellowed with age, and pointed to a specific entry. The house. In just the last 20 years, it had 7 previous owners. 7, and every single one of them had vanished without a trace. No bodies ever found, no signs of a struggle. Police would find the houses completely empty, as if the residents just got up and walked away. The only thing they ever found was blood behind the walls. My mind raced back to the faint stains I'd seen in the living room. It wasn't just old paint. That night, sleep was impossible. The house felt different, heavier. The air was thick with a silence that was anything but peaceful. Then I heard it. Footsteps from the floor above me. Slow, bare feet on old wood. A faint dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. My blood ran cold. I wasn't alone. Who's there? I shouted, my voice cracking with a fear I couldn't hide. "I know you're up there." Silence, and then a sound that will haunt me for the rest of my days. A chorus of whispers coming from every direction, from every room, all at once. "We are." The voice was a symphony of agony, 100 souls speaking as one. My eyes darted around the room, and I saw it. The walls. They were bleeding. Thin, red lines started trickling down the wallpaper like tears of blood, dripping onto the floorboards in a sickening rhythm. Then a loud crack echoed through the house. I spun around, the 4th door. The one that was always locked, It was slowly creaking open. A darkness colder than any night poured out from the opening. I crept towards it, compelled by a force I didn't understand. I peered inside. It wasn't a room, it was a hallway. A long, impossible hallway that seemed to stretch into infinity. The walls weren't made of plaster or wood. They were pulsing, slick, and organic like the inside of some colossal creature. The hallway was breathing. It was alive. And from deep within its endless depths, I could hear them calling my name. I tried to leave. The front door wouldn't open. Windows were sealed shut, like concrete. The house groaned, like it was satisfied. Faces appeared in the walls, screaming silently. I recognized one. My face, older, thinner, hollow. A voice boomed from the ceiling. Every house needs a heart. The hallway behind the fourth door pulsed. The floor beneath me opened. Hands pulled me down. The house wasn't haunted. It was hungry. And it had chosen me. I woke up standing in the hallway. I was no longer alone. I was inside the house. I became the knocking, the whisper, the warning. Months later, a new family visited. I watched through the walls as they smiled. The agent handed them the keys. And before leaving, she said the same words she told me. If you hear knocking after midnight, don't answer. They laughed. The door closed. The house smiled. And I knocked.
I spent one night here, and I regret it.
My name is Daniel Moore, and I never believed in ghosts. That's exactly why I accepted the dare. The house sat at the very end of an old dirt road, completely surrounded by dead skeletal trees. Its windows were blacked out like burned out eyes staring into nothing. The front door hung open just a crack, creaking back and forth even though there wasn't a breath of wind. Locals called it the Hollow House. They whispered stories about it, saying you could hear voices inside. They said no one ever stayed past midnight. I checked my watch as I stepped over the threshold. 9:38 p.m. The smell hit me immediately. A thick, heavy mix of mold, rust, and something else. Something rotten, deep underneath. The floorboards groaned with every single step, like the house itself was aware of my weight, protesting my presence. I set up my camera in the living room, pointing it towards the main hallway. At 10:11 p.m., I heard it. Footsteps from the floor above. Slow, bare, dragging. I whispered into the darkness, "Hello?" The footsteps stopped. Then a voice whispered back, right behind my ear, "You shouldn't have come alone." I spun around. No one was there. My flashlight flickered, casting long, broken shadows across the walls. That's when I noticed them. The walls were scratched, covered in deep claw marks, overlapping each other, like something had desperately tried to crawl its way out. At exactly 11:02 p.m., the temperature plummeted. I could see my own breath fogging in the air. Then, from down the hallway, a door slammed shut all by itself. Bang. My heart was pounding in my chest as I walked toward it. The doorknob was ice cold to the touch. I opened it slowly. Inside the room, there was nothing but a single chair in the center, and fresh footprints in the thick dust on the floor. They led straight to the wall, and then they just stopped. Behind me, the floorboards creaked. I turned ever so slowly. A tall shadow stood in the doorway, impossibly thin, impossibly long, its head bent at an unnatural angle. When my flashlight beam finally hit it, it vanished. But the sound of breathing stayed right there with me. The old house was quiet too quiet, but that'll change the moment midnight arrived. Suddenly, every clock in the house, the grandfather clock in the hall, the mantel clock, even the tiny alarm clock I didn't know existed started ticking, loudly, in perfect, deafening unison. As if that wasn't unsettling enough, a sound drifted down from upstairs, crying. It was soft at first, a faint whimper, but it quickly grew into a desperate, heartbreaking sob. It sounded like a child, lost and terrified. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, to get out of that house and never look back. But I couldn't. Something pulled me toward the sound. I found myself climbing the stairs, each creak of the floorboards echoing the frantic beat of my own heart. The crying led me to a bedroom at the end of the hall. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The air was cold, and the room was a nightmare of peeling wallpaper, but that wasn't the worst part. Written over and over again on every single wall, in dark, dried stains that looked horribly like old blood, were the words, "Stay with US." Before I could even process what I was seeing, the door slammed shut behind me with a sound that shook the entire room. Panic seized me. I spun around, grabbing the doorknob, but it wouldn't turn. It was locked, trapped, and then the room began to change. The walls started moving, closing in on me. The ceiling lowered, pressing down, making the space smaller and smaller. I felt suffocated, crushed. Just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, shapes began to press out from behind the wallpaper. Hands, dozens of them, stretching the faded paper like thin, decaying skin. They were reaching for me, trying to break through. A voice filled the shrinking room, seeming to come from everywhere at once, a chilling collective whisper. "We died here," it said. "Now you stay." I screamed. I screamed until my throat was raw and my voice was gone. I pounded on the walls, on the door, anywhere I could reach, desperate for an escape that I knew wouldn't come. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the movement stopped. A slow, agonizing creak echoed through the silence as the door began to open. Hope surged through me, a foolish, fleeting spark. But what I saw on the other side wasn't the hallway. It was the living room from downstairs. Except it was destroyed. Furniture was overturned, mirrors were shattered, and everything was covered in the same dark, bloody stains that were on the bedroom walls. And I was standing right in the middle of it all, a silent, unwilling resident of this house of horrors. The house had me now, and it wasn't letting go. It was 2:41 a.m. when I found myself in the basement. I don't remember deciding to go down there. My feet just moved on their own, carrying me down the creaking wooden stairs. The air was cold, damp. The walls, they were covered in photographs. Dozens of people, all standing exactly where I was standing now. All smiling this strange, vacant smile. Above them, carved into the stone, were the same words, "One night is enough." A voice. My own voice called from behind the furnace, "Daniel, come see." My heart hammered against my ribs, but I looked, and I saw myself, eyes as black as pits, mouth stretched impossibly wide. It stepped toward me, a whisper hissing from its throat. "The house needs a replacement." The single bulb overhead flickered, then died. Darkness. Then something grabbed my ankle and dragged me screaming into the void. I don't know how long I was trapped. Time didn't exist inside the house. When the front door finally opened, sunlight flooded in. I crawled outside. The house behind me looked normal, quiet, empty. Weeks later, I checked the town records. My name was already there, listed under missing persons. The house hadn't let me go. It had only let my body leave. Every night, at exactly midnight, I still hear the door open, and someone new steps inside. I smile from the darkness, because now, I'm part of the house,